Hey everybody, Bob Lazaro from All Things Leland. Thanks for joining us. Have an important conversation today. Pleased to have two very informed guests on the issue related to the Cape Fear Memorial Bridge. The first is Council Member Veronica Carter from the town of Leland. Council Member Carter serves as the town's alternate member to the Wilmington Metropolitan Planning Organization, and I will let Council Member Carter tell us what that is. And the second is Brayton Willis, resident of the town of Leland, of more than 40 years experience working for the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, which is an important player in this whole debate as to how high the bridge is, how it's funded, etc. So thank you both for joining us.
Thanks for
Thank you for
having me.
inviting. Yep.
You're welcome. Let's start with the perhaps the simplest question. I ask you, Councilmember Carter, what is the WMPO?
Well, the Wilmington Urban Area Metropolitan Planning Organization, that's a mouthful, the WMPO, is basically an organization that was created by federal law. Once a metropolitan area hits a population density of 50,000 people, they federally mandated have to create a metropolitan planning organization. And what that does is that it's a regional cooperative transportation planning process. It takes the rest of the communities in that area, along with the major community, in our case, Wilmington, and we get seats at the table, so to speak, along with NCDOT and other players, and decide how we want to manage both the state transportation dollars and, more importantly, the federal transportation dollars that we are allotted, because all of those monies go into a big pot at the state level, and then they're divvied out. And there's a prioritization process that takes place, and we are trying to get ourselves higher up on the list than areas in the western part of the state or areas in the Piedmont area. And so it is, I almost want to say a major crapshoot, but at least that's what it feels like. And I like to tell people who are new to the MPO process that, to me, it is the most misunderstood federal, not even federal, governmental entity in the state.
Okay.
People don't know it exists. They don't understand why it exists, and they certainly don't understand the power or lack thereof that it has.
Yeah, I mean, and specifically like the replacement for the Cape Fear Memorial Bridge, so estimated to be over $1 billion. The MPO produces no bonds, no revenues, etc. It's just the planning organization that needs to do its own prioritization, so a project could be considered for funding.
Correct. It used to be called a transportation
Okay.
advisory committee years ago.
Okay.
They've been around since the 70s, just for a frame of reference. But they have members that sit on the Wilmington City Council, all of the towns, the major towns in New Hanover County, um, the three counties, Brunswick, Pender, and New Hanover, that are in our jurisdiction, and then in northern Brunswick County, but not all of the towns that you would think. It's Navassa, Leland, and Belleville.
Okay.
So altogether, there are 13 members, and we have on this side of the river only four votes of those
Okay.
13.
Okay. And Brayton, this is not a simple Google project. It's complicated. It has all the elements of the Corps of Army Engineers, the federal government, the state, local governments, etc. What is the Corps of Engineers role in this? And especially a lot of conversation about how tall the bridge has to be.
Well, that's a great question. When we look at the Corps' role, we also have to look at the authorization for the navigation channel. Again, that's a critical piece. And if we examine that with reference to the bridge, it becomes more complicated. And recently, I think it was in 2025, the Corps, working under Section 14 of the Rivers and Harbors Act of 1899, that's going way back, did a 408 analysis saying the only bridge that would fit within the acceptable criteria for going from Brunswick County over to New Hanover County would be a 135-foot high bridge with 135-foot deck
Okay.
clearance.
And this is their determination is not discretionary. It's by law.
Indeed. Indeed. There's a specific criteria that they have to go through to evaluate that. Again, is Section 408, and the Corps of Engineers did their due diligence. That doesn't mean that Congress couldn't weigh in and maybe make changes, but boy, to change a federal project, especially a navigation
Mhm.
project, is darn near next to impossible.
Okay. I mean, and so as the design has changed and the clearance has changed, obviously the cost has come up, and the private sector has now stepped in and said, "Hey, take a look at us. We would be interested in building this, but obviously it would involve tolls." And I want to point out to our viewers that Councilmember Carter was the lead sponsor of the Town of Leland resolution opposing a toll scheme for this bridge. So maybe Councilmember Carter, you could explain a little bit about what the MPO was thinking about, and I believe they forwarded this idea to North Carolina DOT.
Well, we did. And this has been going on for years. This isn't, it comes up in the news every now and then because we hit a deadline or
Mhm.
some major milestone has to take place that requires an answer or comment by or a report comes in like from the Army Corps of Engineers comes in and it makes the news. But this debate and the studies involved, as Brayton mentioned, like the Army Corps of Engineers, have been going on literally for years regarding the replacement project. There's been several design when it just to come up with the design that they have right now with 135 foot took good grief, probably about 3 years, public hearings, different things like that. So this is not just let's stop it midstream. However, for me with the tolls, this would be the first project in the state to replace an existing roadway with a toll. Now, it's not state law, but it's been practiced. If you drive in Raleigh or Charlotte or other places, you've noticed that there are toll roads in North Carolina. We're getting larger, we're getting bigger. There hasn't been really an increase in funding for state roads or
Mhm.
federal roads involving state and federal highway. And so the way that the state has been paying for those is with tolls, or at least assisting in
Right.
paying for them. However, they have kind of had an unspoken mandate that says we're not going to replace an existing roadway with a toll. Now, some argue this wouldn't be replacing an existing roadway, this would be a new bridge. Yeah, it would be replacing an existing roadway because we're not going to continue to use the old bridge. So this is, in my mind, replacing an existing roadway. We have the Hempstead bypass in Pender County. They funded, and I say they, we, the WMPO funded the Hampstead bypass by doing segments. If you add together all of the various segments of the Hampstead bypass, you're at least $500 million.
Okay.
Okay. And there's no toll if you haven't noticed. If you go
Yes.
on I-140, if you go down Capitol Boulevard in Raleigh, again, another roadway that needs repairs, and frankly, the dollar amount is up to $1.3 billion. And it at one point was on the STIP and supposedly was going to get a toll, and then magically it came off from needing a toll, but it's still in the same position on the STIP. And I want to know why. Why are they
Mhm.
special and our residents kind of caught paying a toll?
Yeah, what's interesting in the conversation, and perhaps direct this to you, Brayton. I've heard, U.S. Army Corps of Engineers has made this determination, so it has to reach this certain clearance. At the same time, there's a lack of boat business going north of the bridge. And I believe the Corps has stopped looking at the whole idea of dredging the channel. So the community is caught in this catch-22. It has to be this high, but we're not going to dredge the river that the bigger boats can't go under.
Well, and that is a great question. Um, there has been some talk amongst our citizens about can the Corps truncate or shorten the navigation channel to eliminate that piece. And so the answer, the solid answer on that is no. It is a federal project. And when you take a look at federal projects, not only do they consider today, but they have to look into the future as well. So that doesn't preclude that maybe someday some shipping firm will decide, well, we want to come back up beyond that point, and that has to be available by law.
Okay.
And the Corps again looked at that and said, yes, indeed, and that came out with that derived the 408 determination. They drove the 408 determination, and nothing will change that
Okay.
except Congress.
Okay. And Councilmember Carter, I was going to ask in terms of public process, I noticed that on the NC dot website, there's supposedly going to be a public hearing in the summer. No date has been set. Is that hearing a joint hearing with the WMPO to come to some determination on the private sector tolling option, or is it part of a different process?
It's part of the process. Realize that NCDOT is a member of the WMPO. They
Okay.
have a representative that sits at a board. He's a non-voting member, but he
Okay.
does sit on the board, as does a member of the Transportation Board, NC
Okay.
Transportation Board. So it is part of the process. Uh, Brayton's been here many, many years and has probably spoken at many of these hearings as I have over the years. This is all part, they're required hearings to take
Mhm.
place. Just as when in the local government, we're required sometimes to have public hearings,
Mhm.
depending on what the issue is. These are required hearings. They can make a difference, depending on how many people show up and what the public outcry is. But just screaming at your particular representatives or council won't do it alone, because as I pointed out at the start, there are only four votes on this side of the river
Mhm.
on that 13-person WMPO board.
Yeah, and I know that earlier vote the MPO with Leland voting no voted 8-5 to
Mhm.
advance the tolling option, I guess, to North Carolina DOT.
Correct.
When I realized this is a try to project is a difficult question. I mean, and people can always go like Mr. Willis has to the MPO to speak. I mean, when do you think or when do you see that the MPO will take this up as a formal vote to for consideration?
I wouldn't wait till you take it up to a formal
Okay,
vote. Folks need to be taking it up right now. And
okay,
more importantly, they need to be reaching out to neighbors in Cary Beach, Riceville Beach. The beach communities are all on the WMPO. The folks in Navassa, Belleville, just all of the
okay.
communities that are part of the WMPO, you all have an elected official, and you can go to WMPO.org and find out who those representatives are and start showing up at your council meetings and asking them to please vote against the toll road. That will make a difference. Okay.
Mm,
Um, People from Leland yelling at folks who live in Wilmington is not necessarily going to
mm,
get you anywhere. Okay.
sure.
People in Wilmington telling their representatives in Wilmington on the Wilmington City Council, we don't want this, will make a difference.
I was just in Wilmington today and for volunteering at an organization, and there were a lot of signs on Third Street,
Hmm.
you know,
I've seen them.
no
Yeah.
toll bridge, we support option A, and I think that's just
Hmm.
very confusing. There's all these different options. They all need to reach a certain level.
A
Um,
lot of the folks, Bob, a lot of the folks in downtown Wilmington are concerned because to reach 135 feet
right,
means that a number of neighborhoods in
right,
Old Wilmington will be disturbed.
yes,
They have to be just to get the ramps,
right.
properly.
I've seen some of the
So
drawings. Yeah, it's quite intense. I
it
mean,
is. And in their defense, Wilmington has voted with us in the
yes,
past to be against the toll. That's why I specifically mentioned the beach communities in Pender County. I'm not going to say they don't have a dog in this fight because, frankly, the Cape Fear Memorial Bridge is one of the hurricane evacuation routes, one of the
Right.
major hurricane evacuation routes.
Indeed.
It's a major way people come in, tourists come in to go to the beach.
Hmm.
So they do have a dog in this fight, and
Sure.
they need maybe be reminded of it.
Well,
So,
let me just add quickly
yes.
to that too. Um, Not only is it a major evacuation route, it's a military route. If you take a look at all the different uses that that bridge has,
Right, the port.
one of the more significant uses is the Port of Wilmington. 500 trucks a day go across that, fully loaded trucks go across that bridge every single day. One fully loaded 18 wheeler is the equivalent on pavement wear and bridge wear of 9,000 vehicles. 9,000
Yeah.
vehicles. So that's roughly 2.5 million vehicle impacts going across that bridge every year every day with the port truck traffic.
Bob,
Personally,
can I piggyback off that for a
yes,
second?
sure.
One of the problems that we have is we keep talking about this prioritization list that the state uses, which is a good thing because you don't want pork belly projects, et cetera, for how you spend your transportation dollars. It's called the State Transportation Improvement Program. And the deal is that it has variables that are weighted. And they were decent variables for roads. But when you compare them to a bridge, all the bridges kind of in falling to the bottom because some of the variables are things like how many roads intersect with it.
Hmm.
It's a bridge. There's
Right.
one roadway going in and one road coming out once you cross it. So it immediately doesn't rate as highly as a road.
Sure.
And we've kind of tried to point that out, like, hey, maybe you need to, here on the coast, we really need you to take a look at the variables. But again, we're one voice and not getting a lot of backup from other folks there.
But,
And that would be a decision that would have to come out of state legislature. We talked about Congress. We need the state
right.
legislature to actually change the legislation that deals with how we prioritize our transportation dollars.
Personally, a toll is just so regressive. And all you're going to do is move traffic. Traffic will bleed from the bridge.
Mhm.
They'll go over, I guess, the Isabel Holmes Bridge,
Yep.
which is going to then bring traffic through downtown Wilmington.
Yep.
Indeed.
The last thing you need is more traffic in Wilmington, truck traffic in Wilmington.
Absolutely.
And
Or
so if it's a
I-140.
if it's a private sector deal too, I mean, they're talking about $2.75 one way. I mean,
Mhm.
they have their own amortization table. If they start bleeding traffic somewhere else, the toll's not going to stay $2.75.
Yeah.
It's going to go whatever they need to cover their debt service to
That's
keep
correct.
their bonds, et cetera. I mean, we saw that in Northern Virginia, the Dulles
You,
toll
you
road.
know, you see it in Virginia,
Yeah,
Maryland, Delaware. I lived in New Jersey. I'm still waiting for them to break even with the New Jersey Turnpike and the
yeah,
Garden State Parkway and
yeah,
take the tolls off of those roadways.
yeah.
Those roadways have had tolls almost as long as I've been alive. So when someone says, "Oh yeah, they'll only collect tolls as long as the debt's there," again, I immediately I think of New Jersey and go, "Okay, well, that's not gonna happen." So
Yeah, what I'm getting out of this conversation is look, Leland is firmly opposed to the tolling scheme that has been proposed. People who
let
live
me let me
in,
just let me just say for full
yes,
disclosure. I don't speak for the council in this
yes,
one vote, but we as a council
yes.
been fully against it. Yes,
And the vote at the WMPO has reflected that.
right.
So we need neighbors to reach out to their elected leaders who are on there. We need everyone to reach out to our federal delegation, our two U.S. senators, and our members of Congress to say, hey, this is an unacceptable way of doing business. And being the seventh fastest growing region in the country with multiple billions of dollars in shortfall for transportation, it really calls for the region coming together how to better do this.
Bob,
Indeed.
I'm gonna add, we need to reach out to our state representatives as
Yes,
well. We
yes,
mentioned the STIP and things like that.
right,
We need our all of our state representatives that are involved, our state senators on both sides of the
right.
river that are also involved. So yeah, there's a whole lot of different levels of government that need to step up. We have our county commissioner sits on as a representative for Brunswick County, as does Pender County and New
Yeah.
Hanover County.
I was going to ask both of you one last question. Um, in terms of the WMPO, I'll ask you first, Councilmember Carter. The MPO is eventually going to come up and vote one way or the other. If the MPO says no, we don't like this tolling scheme, what happens?
Um, whether or not the local planning organization, in this case the
Yeah.
WMPO, supports or doesn't support a toll is something that's weighted with the STIP.
Okay.
And so if we lost the points, so to speak, that came with that yes vote for
Right.
consideration, like to consider all possible funding methods, then that would drop us down on the STIP, quite possibly to where we were unfunded.
Okay.
Right now, things that are funded are the estimated time for completion is 10 years out.
Okay.
So we would lose the bridge.
Okay.
You,
And
you know,
Brayton, I was going to ask you, in terms of the Army Corps of Engineers, has there ever been an instance where they've changed something, unless so directed by Congress, that would give the community any optimism that perhaps the bridge could be done, but not as tall to meet the fiscal constraints and also the realistic uh, lack of boat traffic north of the bridge.
uh, I can't think of an instance where the Corps itself
Okay.
made a change.
Okay.
The Corps reports to Congress,
Okay.
the headquarters Corps, and if there's enough public input, enough outcry, I have seen the Corps actually change their position enough to go to Congress and say, we need to make an alteration
Okay.
in the authority. But I also want to add one more quick point. I know we're almost at the end. One fundamental question: what is the right sized bridge? What is the right bridge to be put in there? No question about it. The question comes up on all quarters. And what is the fairest way to pay for it? And I would say, going piggybacking on what Ms. Carter said, if the WMPO, the NCDOT, and the state of North Carolina would take a hard look at the usage by the port, I'm sure there would be a delta in there that could be shared by the port that would probably push us past the need of having a toll.
Okay.
I'm absolutely convinced of it.
Okay.
But
You know, as a
again,
as a former federal employee, I know there are different pots of money, but remember they were going to spend $1 billion to dredge the Cape Fear River for the port.
All right. So this is a story that you always see at the end of the show that you're watching, to be continued,
it is.
because
It is.
it will be continued. Just so our viewers know too, come Wednesday, I put together a little website where you'll be able to click on a button and send an email to the WMPO or to your state legislator or to your members of Congress. I know there's been some conversations about regional approach to financing transportation improvements. That's neither here nor there for the moment. This is in front of us. So, Councilmember Carter and Mr. Willis, thank you both for joining us. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Bob. And let me just add that
Thank you.
public comments by the WMPO are in person. So if you have something to say, you want it to say it, you can't send it to them by email and hope that it gets read into the public record. It
Okay.
it must be their policies to do it in person.
Okay. Thank
And
you.
Bob,
Yes, sir.
I want to thank you very much for this. This is a great opportunity to speak on an important project. But I also want to emphasize whatever decision comes out of all of this has got to be something looking for the next 75
Yes.
to 100 years. That decision um, platform is critical so that we make the right decision.
Right. Yes,
Agreed.
no doubt. That bridge is going to be there for a long time.
That's right.
Agreed. Thank you, Bob.
Appreciate your time.
Thank you, Bob.